Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Emily Carter had been working at the Willow Cafe, a small haven of warmth and simplicity nestled on a magnolia-lined street in the heart of Charleston, South Carolina. The cafe, with its red brick walls and window panes draped in plaid, smelled of toast, fresh coffee, and childhood memories. It attracted neighborhood regulars, commuters in a hurry in the morning, students with their noses buried in their computers, and old couples who came to read the newspaper in silence, hand in hand. Emily, in her 30s, was known for her welcoming smile and her ability to remember orders without ever taking notes. She had a gentle way of speaking that put everyone at ease, a quiet but sincere kindness. Willow Cafe was his refuge as much as his workplace, a stable place in a life that hadn't always been one. But for the past few weeks, a detail had been breaking the routine. A young boy, frail, discreet, with eyes ringed with shadows, came to sit every day in the far corner of the counter. He didn't speak, didn't order anything, and spent long hours motionless, his gaze lost beyond the window, misted by the contrast of the fresh air outside and the warmth of the coffee. At first, Emily thought he was waiting for someone. Then she thought he was studying passers-by, perhaps a young artist searching for inspiration. But very quickly, she understood he came there to disappear. He seemed to be running away from something he could neither face nor forget. One day, while cleaning a table near hers, she noticed her phone was on. On the home screen, there was a single photo, that of a smiling woman, her hair tied back in a messy bun, holding the boy against her. He must have been 10 or 11 years old in this image. That face, bright and full of love, contrasted painfully with the dull expression the boy now wore. Emily was devastated. Discreetly, she had inquired with Mike, the cafe owner, who knew almost everyone in the area. He simply told her that the boy's name was James Mitchell, that he was 16 years old, and that no one really knew where he came from or where he was going. He often wandered alone, always silent, like a ghost stranded at the edge of the world. Every night when she came home, Emily thought about him. She imagined his life, worried about where he slept, if he even had enough to eat. She remembered her own adolescence, marked by abandonment by an absent father and nights spent watching over a sick mother. She knew what it was like to grow up with an absence too heavy for her age. One morning, while the fog still lingered on the cafe windows, James came in. His shoulders were slumped, his face even paler than usual, and his eyes looked as if they had aged several years overnight. He sat down in his chair without a word, placed his worn bag beside him, and crossed his arms on the table, as if clutching it. Emily felt an irrepressible urge rise within her. She turned away from the counter, walked into the kitchen, and emerged a few minutes later with a still steaming bowl of homemade vegetable soup and a roasted chicken sandwich. She gently placed the plate in front of him, saying nothing, and returned to her station. James looked up in surprise. He looked at the food, then at her. Emily met his gaze and offered him a smile, simple, without pity or insistence. Just an "I see you." He looked down, then slowly picked up the spoon. He ate in silence, but at the end, as she collected the plates, he murmured a low, "Thanks," barely audible. It was the beginning of a silent routine. Every day, without another word, Emily prepared him a plate, a hearty breakfast, hot soup, a still warm muffin. Sometimes she slipped a banana or a granola bar into a paper bag, which he discovered once outside. He never asked, she never explained. But something was woven between them, a fragile, almost sacred bond, between two solitudes that had silently recognized each other. A week later, it was just another morning at Willow Cafe. Light filtered softly through the large windows. Customers chatted quietly, some leafing through newspapers, others tapping away at their phones. James sat at his usual table, staring into a cup of tea he hadn't actually drunk. He seemed absorbed, as if his thoughts were wandering far from this quiet Charleston street. Suddenly, the sound of powerful engines shattered the morning peace. From massive, shiny black SUVs roared down the street at high speed, causing a dull rumble that made all the customers look up. The cars screeched to a halt in front of the cafe, their tires squealing on the wet asphalt. A tense silence immediately fell. The doors opened simultaneously. 4 men in dark suits stepped out with military precision. Their gait was assured, their hard, cold gazes scanning the street before settling on the building. They didn't seem to be here for a simple coffee. Emily felt her blood run cold. Her stomach knotted. Something unsettling hung in the air, palpable. She froze for a moment behind the counter, watching the men's closed faces, their eyes searching. Then, those gazes stopped dead on James. Around her, the customers fell silent, the atmosphere thick with palpable tension. Some exchanged worried glances, glanced toward the front door, and finally at James, who hadn't moved. He remained motionless, almost frozen, but Emily had the impression he'd been waiting for them. His normally dull face suddenly seemed tense, as if ready for something. One of the men, taller, with a lined face and salt and pepper hair, walked confidently toward the cafe. He stopped a few feet from Emily and looked her straight in the eyes. "Miss Carter?" he asked, his voice firm but calm, almost authoritative. "My name is Agent Mark Reynolds, FBI." Emily felt her heart race, her throat tighten. "We're looking for a man named James Mitchell," he continued. "We have reason to believe he's in danger." A heavy silence followed his statement. Emily glanced quickly at James. The boy looked down for a moment, then back up, meeting Emily's gaze. An invisible pain flashed through his eyes. She knew at that moment that this unexpected visit was only the beginning of something much bigger, much more dangerous. "Why?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Because this boy, your James, is connected to things he may not even realize," Agent Reynolds replied. "His mother is missing, and he could be the key to finding her. We need your cooperation." Emily felt her world turn upside down. The quiet boy she had come to know was caught in a web of shadows, secrets, and dangers she could no longer ignore. James remained silent for a long moment. His face remained impassive, but his gaze betrayed an inner turmoil. Finally, without protest, he slowly nodded and stood. The FBI agents formed a protective circle around him as they left the cafe. Emily, her heart sinking, followed them without thinking, driven by visceral worry. At the back of the cafe, a small storage office was quickly converted into a makeshift interrogation room. Fluorescent lights flickered, casting a pale glow on tense faces. James sat on a stiff chair, his hands clasped in his lap. He stared at an invisible point on the wall. Agent Reynolds closed the door behind them and knelt down beside James, looking at him with a gentleness rare for a man of his stature. "You're not wrong, James," he said calmly. "But to help us understand, we need you to tell us what you know. Why are you here alone?" James took a deep breath. Then, in a raspy, fragile voice, he began. "My mother, her name is Rebecca Mitchell. She worked for an NGO called Global Witness Alliance. She was involved in documenting human rights violations in West Africa. Last year, she began investigating a network that financed armed groups through human trafficking and illegal mining." He paused, his hands shaking slightly. "She said she discovered names. Powerful people. Politicians. Western investors. She told me not to trust anyone. And then, suddenly, she disappeared." Emily felt her stomach twist. Everything she'd guessed about James, his loneliness, his silence, his pain, was taking on a whole new dimension. "I came here because it was one of the last places she felt safe. She had a friend in Charleston, but she too left, without a trace. So, I hid." Agent Reynolds crossed his arms, his face hardened. "We recently intercepted encrypted communications from a cartel based in Dubai and Eastern Europe. Your name came up, James. That means they know you might have something. A file. Access. You're a danger to them." "I don't have anything," James replied anxiously. "Just a USB drive I found in a false bottom of my mother's suitcase. I don't know what's on it. I never dared open it." Emily felt a lump in her throat. She now saw this boy as a survivor, a young man driven by fear, but also by the unwavering love he had for his mother. Later that evening, as the agents discussed what to do next, Emily made a decision. She wouldn't leave James alone in this storm. He'd been through too much to abandon him now. In the days that followed, Emily activated her own networks. She knew journalists, a former veteran turned security guard, and even the manager of a low-key community shelter for women and children. Together, they established discreet protection around the cafe. Familiar faces watched the street. A former Marine sat on the patio reading the newspaper, but kept a constant eye on James. Every morning, Emily prepared a hot breakfast for him. She cared for him like a wounded younger brother whom life had dealt too quickly. The silent bond between them grew stronger day by day. James, little by little, was opening up. He spoke fondly of his mother, of their Sunday ritual, when they baked cookies and watched old movies, of how she told him that words had more power than weapons. He also told her about the night he heard men entering their house, the heavy footsteps, the muffled voices, and his mother hiding him in a closet with a note, "Run away. And don't look back." Emily listened without interruption, her eyes occasionally shining. She understood, deep down, that James was more than just a silent boy. He was a witness, an heir to a fight he hadn't chosen, but which he now bore with silent dignity. And she, who had thought herself a simple waitress in an ordinary cafe, discovered a new strength within herself. She now understood that acts of kindness, even the most discreet, could become gestures of resistance. Offering a bowl of soup, a look, a silent promise of protection. And in this unlikely alliance, between a kind-hearted waitress, an injured teenager, and federal agents, perhaps the chance to find Rebecca Mitchell and uncover a criminal network with global ramifications lay ahead. Emily knew one thing. As long as she breathed, James would never be alone again. After months of investigation, sleepless nights, and constant danger, the truth finally came out. Using the USB drive James had entrusted, FBI agents had managed to decrypt a series of coded communications leading to a remote warehouse on the industrial outskirts of Charleston. The building, abandoned for years, served as a front for an international network that thought it could disappear into the shadows. The operation was launched at dawn, carried out with military precision. Silent helicopters hovered above the perimeter as agents in tactical gear infiltrated the premises. There was a mixture of adrenaline and silent tension in the air, each step measured, each breath held in place. And at the back of the warehouse, in a windowless room with crumbling walls, a woman sitting on a chair, tied up but alive, looked up as the door opened. "Sarah Mitchell?" Agent Reynolds asked, kneeling beside her. She nodded, exhausted, her features drawn, but her eyes still shining with determination. Despite the months of detention, she had not given in. Her first words, whispered in a broken voice, were, "James, is he alive?" Reynolds placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Yes, and he's waiting for you." A few hours later, in the hospital, in a room with pale walls and hushed silence, James stood by the bed. He trembled, frozen between hope and fear, until the door slowly opened. As Sarah entered, supported by two nurses, James took a step forward. Time seemed to stand still. "Mom," he breathed. Sarah looked up. Despite the dark circles under her eyes, despite the fatigue, she smiled. "My baby, you've grown up?" And in a moment suspended between two heartbeats, mother and son fell into each other's arms. No words could express what they felt. This wasn't just a reunion. It was a resurrection, a miracle carved from pain, faith, and endurance. Emily stood there, a few feet away, silent. Her eyes were misty with tears. She had never known James's mother before that day, but she had felt her love in every silence her son expressed, in every glance she turned toward the photograph he treasured. To see their embrace was to see a circle come full circle, or rather, a life begin again. Sarah, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks, reached out to Emily. "Thank you. Thank you for taking care of my son, for believing in him." Emily squeezed his hand emotionally. "He taught me much more than I gave him." A few weeks later, the Willow Cafe returned to a semblance of normality. The clinking of cups, the laughter of regulars, the warm croissants on the counter. But for those who knew, nothing would ever truly be the same again. Emily now kept a framed photo above the espresso machine. James, Sarah, and herself, all three smiling, standing outside the cafe. A simple image, but one that carried the echo of a quiet struggle, an unwavering love, and the light born from an act of kindness. James, meanwhile, had found a kind of peace. He still came to the cafe, but this time to work part-time, help Emily, and write on his laptop. He told their story, the story of a silence that hid a scream, of a boy who ran away, of a woman who reached out, and of a mother who, even in the shadows, had never stopped believing. One day, while cleaning a table, he asked Emily, "Do you think all this will be of any use?" Emily looked at him fondly. then pointed to the door, where a customer was holding her child's hand. Look closely. Every life saved, every truth revealed. That's already a victory. And in the corner of the cafe where he once sat in silence, where the sun streamed through the window in long golden lines, James settled down with a notebook. For the first time, he wrote not to escape the past, but to build the future.